Hey everyone, this is Christian again with another episode of Scent, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Maya Warren from North Carolina, who has got an amazing album that just came out, and it's some neo soul gospel music with a little bit of R&B vibe, and uh, I can tell you right now, you're going to enjoy it. There's going to be a link down below here that's going to lead you to her music. But we're going to focus today a little bit on her music, but a lot on her testimony. Uh, Yesterday, I got to speak with her for a little bit, and her testimony is powerful. So, Maya, could you just tell us a little bit about your growing up years, what you went
Yeah,
through?
navigated a lot. Grew up in the context of trauma from both parents, physically, mentally, emotionally, as well as spiritually. So my most formative years, I remember going to church, but seeing my parents behave one way in church and a different way at home. Um,
Oh,
and as a result, that I remember being around the age of 8, and like I just had a conversation with God because what I was learning in Sunday school and what I was learning when I would go to church with my grandmother wasn't adding up with the character of my parents. And so
mm,
I was like, God, if this is what that's supposed this all of this is supposed to be about, then I don't know if I want any parts of that. And the first time I ever heard the audible voice of God, um, he just very gently said, like, don't punish an imperfect don't punish a perfect God because of imperfect people. um
mm.
and yeah, he essentially like just said, hey, give me a try. And a few weeks later, after mulling it over, I said the prayer of salvation with my grandmother, in the driveway of our mobile home at the time.
Wow. And you had mentioned that your grandmother had a huge impact on your life
Mhm.
after that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, she did. So my story is relatively long, but when you consider events that led up to it, my biological mother had passed away from brain cancer in 2020, and my biological father slowly began to like descend into like madness, and was assaulting me on a regular basis. And one day he eventually um, would call the authorities on himself. And as a result, the police kind of got involved and we ended up in my grandmother's custody. Um, and the beauty of, despite the madness, like God intervened. And I tell people I have a song that says, foster care was not a fairy tale. You look at me, I hit it well. And we eventually ended up in her guardianship and in her care. But there was just a lot of things that I was dealing with, things that, as she was probably dealing with the fact that, her son, had done all these things to her grandchildren. And she was walking through all of that. But God intervened, and she, was able to take like some adoption courses and adopted my brother and I around the time of my freshman slash sophomore year of high school. Um, and so, both of us got to change our first and middle names. So yeah, it was just a pivotal time, and I'm grateful for the way that the Lord used her and planted seeds, in spite of everything.
That's a beautiful story. I have an adopted daughter, and you had mentioned that you've been, in a sense, adopted 3 times. And I
Mm,
really dug that because my daughter says that she's been adopted twice. And I just love that because of the scripture that's in Ephesians
mhm.
that says we're adopted. And it's amazing to be adopted in God's family.
It is.
So another family took you in like a spiritual family. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. So later on in life, young adulthood. So this is I would say like my last year of college, I came into contact with, I became a part of a Christian kind of online community through a content creator on YouTube. And he had like a Patreon. So there was like these Zoom calls you could be a part of as a result of being a member of the Patreon. And around the time I felt God leading me to start a podcast, which I did not want to do. I barely wanted an online presence. I really didn't want it all. So it was like essentially calling me further out of my comfort zone. Um, so I said, during the most recent call that happened, I was like, hey, his name is Ruslan. I was like, hey, Ruslan, I believe God is leading me to start, a podcast, and I don't really know how that's going to go. I don't know what I'm doing. What are your thoughts? And he was like, you gotta record and film multiple times a day, every day. And like, it was very like jarring for multiple reasons. I have multiple chronic conditions. So consistency on my end varies at times. And I started feeling really overwhelmed. And then he started deferring to a gentleman on the call by the name of Pastor Roy. And this gentleman, I had seen, his YouTube channel because he had been a guest on Ruslan's channel. So I did my own research. I was like, oh, I like his content. And he happened to be on the call that day. And he was like, be the level of consistent that God is calling you to be. And I was like, you know what? It seems very simple, but it was very freeing. And then later on, through his nonprofit at the time, I signed up for a grant, and his organization helped me get my first camera that would help with that podcast, because they believed in the mission of what God called me to do and just taking that leap of faith. Then after that call, he sent me a message. He was like, our family just moved to the Greensboro area. If you need anything, just let us know. And so later on, I would end up serving with them in their church at the time for outreach ministry for people who are experiencing homelessness. And, I've been a volunteer and done outreach my whole life. So to be in that environment with them, like planted a seed. I gave his daughter a tour of my university at the time. So like just little things were adding up that I didn't foresee. And about a year later, on New Year's Eve night into New Year's Day, I ended up experiencing like a pivotal circumstance with my grandmother. And through the leading of the Holy Spirit, the Lord was like, you need to leave. And so packed my things the next morning, and by faith, like left, got a hotel. And I'm like, God, like you led me to leave and you brought me here. What do you want from me? Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make heads or tails of this. And he was like, in that community group, share in the prayer request channel what you just went through. So by this time, I had left Ruslan's Patreon and community, and I transitioned into Pastor Roy. So I'm really appreciative that Ruslan was able to be a point of connection, because it helped, foster this relationship. And I shared, and within like a few minutes, I got a message from Pastor Roy, and he was like, our family would love to open up our home to you for at least a week. And when he did that, I was like, I don't know. That sounds interesting. And when you have trust issues, it's like, I don't know. But I ended up like moving on that. I texted my therapist at the time, and she was like, God is opening the door, walk through it. So I walked through it, and week after week, I was packing up my suitcase, expecting them to kick me out, and they didn't. And by July, they were like, we'd love to open up our home to you permanently, and you don't got to leave unless God calls you elsewhere or you get married, whatever the Lord has in store for you. We want to support you. And so, yeah, that has been one of the fundamental aspects of my journey that has helped change my life for the better. Like me as a person wouldn't be this far along, especially in the span of 4 to 5 years, without God using them and bringing me family through them. And I wouldn't be the artist that I am because God used that as a catalyst to help me learn to open up and trust God with the outcome before I ever stepped into putting my music out into the world.
Yeah, it's so beautiful how God allows us to have family that's not blood
Yeah.
because of His blood, and
Amen.
it's beautiful. Uh, your music, you've got some great songs like Sanctuary. I love that song. Uh, I know you use some songs pre-written, but can you take us into your songwriting? Uh, what's what's been the main thing that's been pushing you to go the direction you've gone with your music?
Honestly, just availability to the Lord. I think, um, when you trust God with your story, it gives way to interesting opportunities for him to use it. And one of those ways he uses my story is through music. Um, my first project that I released in 2022, I did not view myself as an artist. I thought God was just giving me songs to put out. I had left social media, I didn't promote it. Um, but that was a collection of songs of things that I was learning as God, gave me family. I'm learning to be present. I'm learning to not dissociate. I'm learning to depend on other people. I'm learning to trust God in a new way. And so all those songs are, you know, iterations of that journey. And
Hmm.
much of them still convict me to this day, especially out of my own way. And then 2023, becoming Mayia, the Lord was like, I want you to put out a body of work that tells your story up until this point through music. And that
Hmm.
was very challenging. At this point in time, I still did not see myself as an artist. I thought the Lord was just giving me a really cool hobby. Um, and so I kind of shared my music here and there, but it was more like, a kept secret, so to speak. Um, During this time, a friend of mine gave me my first opportunity, official opportunity to perform. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then I was like, all right, back to, keynote speaking. I'm a disability advocate, you know, doing consulting and community outreach. So I'm like, back to this, I'm not really thinking much of that. And we get towards the summer and God's like, put out this body of work. I need you to start working on it. I'm like, and song after song like challenged me, and not in terms of creating them, but in terms of dealing with the underlying issues that I hadn't addressed. So Whole Truth talks about like my literal journey, um, even down to my name change and the abuse and all the things. Abba
Hmm.
talks about learning to trust God as my father, and the expression of that fresh perspective was special for me because, like, on the heels of Abba, the last song in the project is done with my Kingdom Dad, Roy Dockery, who his artist name is Pastor Roy. So like, there's a lot of pivotal things. Nothing left. Never Been Abandoned talks about, the relationship with my mom that was felt non-existent because of her rejection and all. So we're dealing with a lot of stuff creatively, but also personally at the same time. So the process of this album, though it was rapid, from a creative process perspective, it was rapid from an internal growth perspective. Um, and then December of 2023, as I was preparing to like release this album, my Kingdom family, they were like, you should really like fundraise and do an album event. And I'm like, I'm not trying, this is not trying to be like a whole big thing. Like, I'm just trying to, the Lord gave me songs and I'm just trying to put them out. It's still not registering to me what God is doing. And so I listened, because when God puts wisdom in people, that he's placed in your life, you listen. And I do all my own graphic design and website management. So I launched the fundraiser, and in 3 days, the full amount and then some was raised. And that third day was my birthday. And that's when the
Oh,
Lord was like, hey, I want to use you in this way. Like, I need you to understand, like, I want to use you in this way. I know you're comfortable, or, you've gotten to a place where, you feel like advocacy and speaking is the main thing, but I want to use you here as well. So I need you to go all in. And so my birthday in December of this year will be 3 full years. And so, fast forward in between that time, God had already inspired me through hymns. Hymns are a big part of my upbringing and musical inspiration. And you pair the theme between most hymns is tragedy, and their response to tragic events in their lives is to pen songs that breathe adoration to the King of Kings in some of the lowest moments. You have people who have lost families through travel, disease, losing everything to fires. All manner of things have happened to most of the authors of these hymns that we know and love. And I think that's why they're so powerful across all nationalities, ethnicities, ages. It speaks to God's sovereignty and acknowledges our human frailty in a way that kind of gives reverence to the God that we serve. And so as I'm navigating physical health challenges and things, and God's calling me to put this project out. So I say all that to say, like, I'm not married to a particular sound. I'm not married to a particular, like, this is the wave, let me go chase that. I'm literally like, with every project, with every song, I am like saying, God, what is it that you want to communicate? And with the gifts, with the tone, with the skill set you have given me, like, I'm available. Show me how to communicate that effectively to impact lives for the kingdom.
You mentioned that you're an advocate. Can you tell
Mm.
us a little bit of that history that you're a part of?
Yeah, so I started advocacy in the area of disability around the 8th grade. And it began during a pivotal time in my life where I hated people because of everything that I was going through. I just, I wasn't a fan of people. But God, for whatever reason, like, kept giving me opportunities to walk alongside people and educate folks and create awareness about, legal blindness and different issues that I was navigating. And while that was happening, I had a school social worker pull me aside. She's like, "Baby, do you know what you're doing?" And I was like, talking? And she was like, "No, you're advocating. You're an advocate." And I was like, "I'm a what now?" And so that was literally a God moment where God used someone to speak into my life. It wasn't something like, I want to be an advocate. It was literally something that God orchestrated. And so over the years, had opportunities to speak and create art that helps affect policy, sometimes on a corporate level, sometimes on a nonprofit level. And then by the time I was getting ready to graduate college, God had, I was studying to be a physical therapist. And God was like, "I don't want you to do that. Don't go to graduate school. Don't get your PhD. I want you to go into full-time disability advocacy." Which there was no framework. There's no like structure to that. And I was like, Lord, I've been working 8 years towards this. And so I talked to my mentors at the time, who later became that kingdom family I talked about. Um, and they were like, just trust God, like, do what he says and trust him. And so I did, started the podcast, ended up interviewing people from all walks of life, navigating some form of disability, joined several like nonprofit organizations in addition to the ones that I already been collaborating with, and started to affect policy and change in the area of program design, and even down to culture within different organizations, especially as we're ending the pandemic, and you're dealing with the whole like remote work situation at a lot of nonprofits and corporations and churches, and what does it look like to make that transition from home back to the office when people have set up different accommodations for themselves at home, and they're afraid to vocalize that to their managers, as that transition is kind of unfolding. um, I'm on 2 nonprofit boards, one for foster care, and one for disability. And so every aspect of my story, the Lord has provided opportunities for me to um, have influence and impact and create solutions. And it's just, been following his lead, and like as the Lord makes me aware of things, like finding ways to add value and be a light in those spaces.
Wow. Are you planning to continue in that if your music career does blossom? Which, frankly, in my opinion, it's going to. Uh, or what's your
Well,
plans in the future? What's God leading right now?
yeah, I don't really have any plans or like aspirations, and I don't mean to say that in like a deprecating way,
No,
but
no,
like
no.
the Lord has been very strategic. So when he initially called me to music, he was like, I'm going to decrease some of those speaking engagements and things like that, but just be faithful over here and watch me work. And so that first year was like I had less speaking engagements and advocacy things than ever. I had some here and there, but it was much less. And I remained faithful. God kept giving me opportunities to perform. I was learning how to. I really had to learn. It was really a year of development in terms of my mindset towards being an artist. There were just a lot of things that weren't on my radar, and I had to learn to adapt, even in how to talk about myself as an artist and what I do. Like that felt really weird to even write my own bio, and so God used my kingdom family to help lay that foundation and deal with some of those barriers. And then the second year, I started noticing those engagements and the opportunities to serve in the community slowly but surely come back in. So organizations that um, I'm seeing in this year, organizations that I've spoken with for disability related things, now that they know I'm an artist, I'm getting asked to come and do both the speaking and the singing. One
Oh, that's awesome.
organization, yeah. And so this year, um, like I'm seeing God blend everything. So I like to tell people I'm not compartmentalized. So every facet of my life kind of blends together. Like I don't really clock out. So that's why I'm always responding to messages and emails and things like that. But it's not because I'm operating in my own strength. It's just because God has given me uh, a big capacity for rest because I do have multiple chronic conditions. Literally, my schedule has a lot of periods of rest that the Lord provides. But then from that place of rest, that's when a lot of the mundane tasks or the administrative things get taken care of. So I'm able to connect with people like rapidly, and as a result, like opportunities to sing and speak. I have another opportunity this summer. Um, so I'm seeing God merge the two. And so I tell people I'm a missional artist. So literally, like the tagline of my LLC is ministry minded, impact driven. Um,
Ooh,
and the
all
reason why
right.
that is because everything I do flows from that, from leading worship in prison ministry to helping behind the scenes, with somebody who's planning an event, or, serving as the mic tech for somebody else's music festival. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it falls into the mission statement God has given me. God gives me the capacity to be in alignment and flow in that way. So now I'm seeing the convergence of all those things. I'm even more involved in my community now. Just went fishing with the Wake Forest, police department, which is a town in North Carolina. I'm a member of the local chamber of commerce, several networking groups, and literally I'm in there. Everybody knows I'm a gospel artist, and I have people who know Jesus or not advocating for me because they believe in the authenticity of what I get to do. And so when you literally just trust God, he opens doors that he intends for you to walk through, and he will close the ones that he's like, that ain't it for you. I got something better. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see what he will do long term. I think legacy looks like to me continue to have meaningful impact in every facet of life as the Lord orchestrates it.
Well, let's finish the conversation with the prison ministry. Uh,
Yeah.
that's amazing that you've gone through some heartache and some hard things, and here you're going into the prisons. Um, uh, what is that like for you, and what do you end up doing there? Are you doing the music or are you speaking?
Yeah. So I kind of alluded to it in my testimony earlier. My biological father was incarcerated for multiple reasons, but the main reason was abusing me. And he was recently released. And that year that he was released, I think it was like 2024. I like had a level of intrepidation that I didn't anticipate. Because you generally don't have to think about it until, and I was promised that I would have been notified, and that didn't happen. I had to find out, through my therapist, former therapist. It was a lot of things. And so I sent a message to the elders at my church, and I was like, hey, so this is what's going on in my life. If y'all can just pray that God would lead me and guide me. Because I believe that God wants to open doors for wholeness. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but I want to be submitted to his will more than my emotions. And after I sent that email, I kept getting this strong impression. Like the Lord was like, hey, just so you know, you're going to be serving a prison ministry, but just wait. That was 2024. And I was like, okay, God, sure. Great. So I go about, a whole year, and our church in that December had started collaborating with the organization called Proverbs 226. And what they do, I think it's twice a year, basically the largest prison in North Carolina. They do a entire day where they're able to go in with volunteers and allow the children of the incarcerated fathers to spend time with their fathers for a day. So they have worship, a father-daughter dance, and if I'm not mistaken, I think they're like unchained, or they're able to have physical contact with your children, which is like a game changer in so many ways. And so leading up to this event, I'm like, okay, God, how do you want me to serve? And so he was like, I want you to serve and just kind of like welcome the caregivers and parent the mothers and whatnot at the church. And so after serving from that event, I was like, oh God, like it wasn't something that I was actively super aware of, but that whole day he had given me stamina, and the conviction of what I went through and seeing what God has brought me through, and then looking at these children, I was like, I was once them. In a unique capacity. And I was like, God, like what a blessing it is to be for another generation what I didn't have, and just to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so this past year, I was like, okay, God, I'm available whenever. And I started talking to Proverbs 226, and I did a fundraiser event with the Carolina Care Center, which they do prison ministry as well. They go into the women's prison and in several of the men's prisons, and they do worship service, and they preach the word, and they really like build relationships with these inmates. And so Chuck Thompson, who is over the prison ministry at Carolina Care Center, he's like, you're on my radar, Mayia. We're going to get you on the calendar. So this year, God lines it up for me to get my blue card volunteer training, which basically allows you to be registered with the state as a volunteer, especially in a religious capacity as they deem it. And got my blue card. And as soon as I did, God really started opening the floodgates. And so I think it was April, I got my first opportunity to kind of shadow for the first service at the women's prison. And then they let me lead the second service. And like, as we were handing them like the lyrics for the worship service, like just looking the inmates in the eyes and just saying good morning, or like, we're happy to see you, all that, like it changed like people's demeanor just to be acknowledged as a human being. And so literally next weekend it's going to be a prison weekend because I'm serving with both Proverbs 226 and Carolina Care Center. But serving in prison ministry has been something that yes, we're serving inmates, right? We're with the hope of, allowing them to experience the goodness of Jesus Christ to the point of repentance and becoming disciples and then making disciples. And at the same time, I noticed a change in my heart in the sense that God bringing a resolution to things that I had experienced, and the fact that I get to be helpful and use my gifts and talents just as much as some of the inmates are using their gifts and talents to help facilitate some of these events from the inside out. Just being able to serve along other organizations that have a heart for people and making disciples inmates, but also having inmates receive the gospel and they make disciples, and then changing lives in the area of their children. I think has been something that has been a blessing, and allowing my story to be used in the hands of God to help bring dignity to others has been a blessing.
That's awesome. Well, Mayia, this has been an absolute pleasure. And everybody's listening to this, if you would check down below for music, and also check the website down below. Be in prayer for her, support her. This is amazing what she's doing. And I'm looking forward to sometime bringing her out to Arizona to bring her music and her advocacy out to Arizona. Which I want to end with this. If you're out there and you're going, how can God use me? Know this, God can use anyone. Sometimes we look at our own limitations and we think, how could God use me? As you've heard from Mayia, all the things that was thrown at her life, she could have easily given up, but God is using her powerfully. So don't let those things in your life stop you, whether it be a disability or your family life or whatever. God can and will use you amazingly in your life and other people's lives. It's awesome. So don't give up. Keep going forward. Follow God's lead. God bless. I hope to see you at the next episode of Set.